What differentiates a human and an animal? I believe it is the brain which differentiates these, the complexity and advancement of the brain. An animal is a little bit more, and their nervous system is a bit more like a microcontroller. You can think of a microcontroller as a simplified computer. Maybe think of an old calculator or an old phone before smartphones were real. And a human's a bit more like a smartphone or a computer, a modern computer. The complexity is far, far greater. The system is similar. They both have a nervous system. And of course, in the past, there were ideas of human-animal hybrids, or essentially animals that had the human level of intelligence, things like yaoguai, yokai, demons, etc. You can find lots of pictures of these throughout history, and whether they are fantasy or not. Of course, there are some websites you can browse, which I've made a video on, which show the idea of a human-animal hybrid. But that's not what this video is about. I believe that through the brain and the nervous system, through electromagnetism, this explains all of spirituality, religion, psychic ability, the occult, etc. We have various systems in the body that relate to the elements of nature. They also relate to the major spheres or the planets. For example, the heart relates to the sun. The nerves relates to Mercury. We have the digestive system, the excretory system, the reproductive, etc. We also have the nervous system, which is a lower etheric, and the higher etheric is the brain, where the consciousness resides within. It's possible that you could transfer the consciousness of yourself or another person into another body, be that human, animal, robotic, or something else. One crude method, of course, is the transfer of the brain and the nervous system, or simply just the brain. Though, in old Taoist ideas, supposedly they could work on the channels, the nerves and such within the body, control them almost telepathically. So some of them were able to transfer their soul from their body to another soul, and this essentially would act as a pseudo-immortality. Now, what we really want to be understanding is what is the physics of that, because firstly, a lot of people would say, well, that's fake, that's not real, that's just some fantasy, that's just in games or comics or movies or something. But there are too many written accounts of these things, of telekinesis, of clairvoyance, being able to see off in a distance and such, of soul travel, of reincarnation, of people who remember themselves. There are CIA documents of telekinesis and astral projection and such. At some point, you have to begin to realize that these things exist, and if they exist, how do they exist? What is the actual physics of that? And that's what we're going to kind of go into. I believe it is through the brain and the nervous system and the electromagnetic elements that we are able to do these things. For example, if you want to have clairvoyance, you will, in your imagination, which is essentially your ability to see and project out, it's like your crystal ball within the center of your brain, which allows you to cross the boundaries of space, time, of physics, physical objects and such, to go beyond that. In your imagination, you look at a certain area of, maybe like a town or a city, or you go to a person, you look at a person and you see where they are, what they're doing, you see them in their room, and you do this intending to really see that person, to really teleport there almost. I believe what you're doing is you're accessing the essentially psychic ether, which permeates all things, essentially the spatial world, the world of space, of area, You are electromagnetically kind of like surfing through there, or riding through this ether, this area, and you're projecting like a phantom or a ghost in that actual physical location, someone's house, someone's backyard, maybe a forest or a beach or whatever, that really does exist, and you are seeing that place through your imagination, which is essentially your internal smartphone or internal computer, which you are able to access the external electromagnetic reality through that. If you look up how electromagnetic tech works, the idea of a radio receiver, you can essentially have a rod with a wire around it, and you pulse that, or you send a frequency through that, and you are permeating the air with electromagnetic radiation, which could send a signal like a voice or a picture or something, depending on the frequency. The brain, I believe, is the same. It's just sending this electromagnetic frequency, and we're tapping into the grid. Now, I think before we had radio towers, this was a lot easier to do, and people did it a lot more. Now, because there's so much electromagnetic radiation, like pollution essentially from telephone towers, Wi-Fi routers, phones, etc., computers, street lights, even all these wires and all this stuff going around everywhere, I think it's a bit harder to see and tap into this world. If we go on something like telekinesis, which is essentially the ability to manipulate physical objects. So it's like opening and closing a door, or pushing some blinds, or lifting an object. If you look up John Hutchinson and you look up the Hutchison effect, he was able to electromagnetically levitate objects that weren't metallic. He could levitate metallic, but I'm talking about like a non-magnetic. It's not exactly, you can levitate metal electromagnetically. It's pretty easy as long as it's magnetic, right? But this was any object. It was like wood, something that would usually be an insulator. Also, this effect tore apart metal, caused like vibrations, I believe, and did other strange things. It shows that electromagnetically you can, perform levitation and such. I think we are essentially replicating the Hutchison effect through our brains and bodies and nerves, and we're able to push and pull or lift objects the same way that you can do that with magnets and metal wires, electricity and such. It's almost like you're charging the object, but I think it goes beyond that. I don't think we're just charging an object to make it kind of like a magnet. I think we're accessing a higher dimension of physics almost. So you would also be able to do that, levitation of the body, for example. And again, physically it is using the electromagnetic power of the body, of yourself, your soul and such. Constantly we're picking up on other people's emotions and thoughts and feelings and such. If you make someone happy, you will feel happy, usually because unless you've got some kind of internal complex that makes you happy, but usually because you feel the other person's happiness and radiance. If you make someone miserable, that's why it's difficult, for some people to punish others, because they're going to have to feel the strong negative emotions of another person. Of course, it's important, some people need punishment to direct them on the righteous path, so to speak. But you will pick up the back blow of whatever negative emotions they feel. Again, this is performed like electromagnetically, probably electromagnetically, chemically as well. There be a chemical element, to all of this, of course. But we're just focusing on the electromagnetic. So, I'm sure you've had experiences where you've picked up on other people's thoughts and emotions many different times. Anytime I go out in public, this will happen, usually. You just have to pay attention to your own thoughts and feelings, or what you think are your own thoughts and feelings. They may not be. You may wonder, why are you feeling a certain way? Maybe it's because you're not. Maybe it's because someone else is. Now, The idea of chi, you see, the spine is the largest channel of, I guess, electromagnetic energy in the body, and the brain being its center. So you can use the spine and the nerves in the brain to, harness this energy, harness this force of nature, the lightning force essentially. And focus and will is the action, so to speak, or the director, the navigator of this force. If you focus on something, you are charging it with energy. You're using this energy to direct and guide it. So for example, focusing on an external object outside you, eventually it will glow a kind of blue glow. This is what you think of as an etheric aura of that object. I think through, focusing on an object or something, you can perform telekinesis. You focus and you push on it. Similarly, other psychic abilities would be performed through a kind of focus, a modulation of focus to produce elements, for example. Potentially in the future, we'll figure out how to create any kind of element through electricity, electromagnetism, maybe converting it to water or we've already learned how to convert it to fire, for example. And technically through physical objects, we can convert it to wind through a fan. But actually, no, now that I think about it, there are those fans that I think they use high voltage to do it, like a lifter. There's a bladeless fan. I'm not sure if the current bladeless fans in the market have some other kind of mechanism, but at least you can create bladeless fans through high voltage. It pushes the air essentially. So that is the conversion of electricity to air and fire. What is to stop a human from converting their internal electricity and using their electrical system in order to create fire, electrical sparks, or air? Water is a little bit more of a complicated, and Earth is a more complicated one because they are physical, dense matter and they require probably a lot more energy. But who knows? I think it is possible for us to create the 4 elements. So I want to summarize everything. Essentially, through the brain, the nerves, the soul exists there. It's this higher level intelligence, more developed brain that gives a human power over the earth, power over the world, and the ability to create computers and engineering and cars and houses and such that animals cannot. I believe psychic, spiritual, religious, occultic, etc. phenomena is explained through this. Because if you think about it, if you only use the muscles to push something, and muscles of course run on electricity, but if you only use the muscles to push something, you're only going to have so much force, so much ability. If you somehow figure out how to amplify your muscles, or even just push an object with your, mental force, you would unlock a higher level of potential. That's all for this one. I hope you got something out of it. And of course, feel free to check the links in the description for social and commercial things. Goodbye and have a nice day.